Busing for Better Education started in Boston with the voluntary desegregation program known as METCO. It allowed students from the city to attend school in the suburbs, and it was started by local parents seeking an alternative to unequal and substandard education in the Boston public schools. Since the 1960s, the program has been mainly hailed as a success for Black and Latinx students, but also for the program's suburban partners. But the gains also come at a price, as is shown by a locally produced documentary airing tomorrow night on GBH TV. The title is Codeswitching: Race and Identity in the Suburban Schoolhouse. To tell us about it are the producer, Mike Mascoll, and the director, Jonathan Schwartz. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.
I want to start with Mike. You're a METCO alum from Boston who attended school in Lexington. But talk about the main part of the title here, code switching. This goes way back, long before METCO even going back at least to that sort of double consciousness that W.B. Du Bois talked about.
Oh, absolutely. The term code switching, it resonates in multiple cultures, not just in reference to our, experience through the METCO program. But, one thing that resonates for me in code switching is that it was a pretty common theme for myself and most of the students that I went to school with. Generationally, it seems to be there, whether it was the 60s, 70s, or now in present time, code switching is still a method of survival when you're navigating in space unfamiliar to your own, circle and boundaries.
Jonathan, what about the sort of chemistry that's reflected by this documentary? Because this is not just about race, and as Mike hinted here, it's about differences between generations and genders.
Yeah, well, that's what made it so exciting, because we made a snap decision at the last minute to have the different generations actually interview each other. And when folks are discussing the METCO experience, they don't necessarily get a chance to talk to older people or younger people that went to the program. So that sparked a lot of chemistry and introspection. And things were different in the old days, but they weren't different in the old days. And issues around race and gender and systemic racism have evolved, but they may have been always present.
Mike, one of the things that I picked up on from this documentary that I didn't pay much attention to before is how sports was helpful for men or the male students, but maybe not as helpful for the female students.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sports was a source of comfort and a source of access to the community, beyond just being seen in the community. That was an opportunity to be embraced by that community. So there's a certain level of comfort kind of goes with that. The males kind of gravitated to that, and for the most part, females who didn't play sports probably didn't have that extra opportunity to be embraced by the community as quickly as we were. But that in itself, leads to a lot of other issues that we discover in the film and reflecting back on the experiences of different folks.
Or the film kind of argues that even those women who were involved in sports, including both of our female characters, did not have quite the same cachet and the same perceived value in the suburban context.
I want to come back to you because you're a METCO alum from Lexington, but you also said something about things that were new to you. What were your discoveries from doing this documentary?
Yeah, again, what I didn't realize, until I had the opportunity to look back at or had the opportunity to talk to others, was just the simple fact that it had a lasting impact in their life and certain triggers that they still kind of go through as an adult. What's kind of was kind of good for us is we had the opportunity to put a microphone in front of folks and make them feel comfortable enough to at least bring some of those stories to the forefront for the first time.
So how would you sum up your history? I mean, as just overwhelmingly successful story, or were there some really difficult parts of it too?
I'd sum up my experience as ongoing. That's what I would say. Even as a 55-year-old adult, I'm still going through the METCO experience, and I say that because a lot of it has to do with how you navigate and how you network and how you take advantage of the relationships that you formulated through the years. So it's ongoing, and that's the most interesting part. So there's some lessons that I could pass back to this generation and tell them, hey, here's a little heads up. Here's some things you should be focused on. Here's some things that might turn out to be very important and vital to your future success. So ongoing.
Jonathan, one of the other things I noticed from was talked about in this documentary is how things are different more recently, especially with social media, because in the 1960s, you had to contend with what was right in front of you. Whereas now you've got people who are not right in front of you. They're more surreptitious, but they can be very toxic too.
Well, there's the toxic factor that's overt, like overt bullying. There's the toxic factor that's just plain ignorant, the way people discuss skin tone or body image. And there's also the the stories we heard of being the expert on all things in urban culture or Black culture, that young women at 10 o'clock at night during Black History Week would be pummeled over social media to come up with statistics on slavery or the Reconstruction, right? Just they were supposed to be on-call informants.
Mike, what about what was expressed by Candace? Because she's a teacher now in the Boston Public Schools, and she's teaching her students about Black history and culture. And one of the things that she noticed is that suburban lens through which you had to see yourself when you were a kid going through this program. It was a lens where Black people were invisible most of the time, except for maybe Black History Month. I mean, how did you feel hearing that?
Well, I mean, she's spot on. She's spot on. We were limited in the amount of information that we were receiving in our education. I could tell you a lot about Lexington and battle on the green and my Tricon hat and so forth, but I probably couldn't tell you about some of the things that she discussed. Those are the things that you find out about later on, and you look back and you say to yourself, wow, those were missed opportunities, not just for us, but for even the suburban community, to get a better sense of our history and what our contributions were to the world.
Jonathan, what about that? Because this is not just sort of waxing nostalgic and saying what a great program this was. This is a documentary that's also about ways this program can be stronger, and not just for students of color.
Well, not just this program per se, but the need for more Black teachers, more Black studies, more support for young people in this program, more education on around issues of racism, overt and inadvertent, obvious and not so obvious, critical components of what particularly middle school and high school education should include. Because I have had, children in both the inner city school system and the suburban school system, and the ignorance around many of these issues in suburbia is shocking.
Mike, one of the things that really grabbed me in the documentary was almost something that was bordering on the marginal, where Ronald Settles, one of the METCO alums, he's a Mattapan, and he's talking to the driver of a pickup truck, who I think might also be a METCO alum, but he has a son going to school in Boston who's sort of going off on the wrong track. I mean, how did you feel about that encounter?
I recognize it as a missed opportunity. You know, I went to school with a number of students who didn't finish the program. You know, left it at the elementary, middle, high school level, and you know, I'm still in touch with them till this day. And I know, for the most part, if they had a chance to do it all over again, they would have liked to finish the program all the way through. So it's heartening to watch that.
What about the other end of the equation, Mike? When you came back from Lexington, you're in your neighborhood, people maybe giving you some flack. Uh, I mean, exam school kids in Boston experience a little of that too, but what was that like for you?
Yeah. You know, I had two kind of friends coming back to the city. I had friends who were in the program in other suburbs, and we could certainly understand why we were making that sacrifice. But also, I had friends who were from the city, went to school in the city, and for the most part, I think some were understanding and some weren't. You know, and the ones who weren't understanding just felt that you know, but beyond the education, there was something else that was lacking by, you know, stretching your boundaries that far. You know, why go that far? Why sacrifice that much time? Why commit so much of your life to that? You know, work on your home base.
Finally, Jonathan, this is going to be on tomorrow night. So if people want more information about catching it on TV or even online, what's the best thing to do?
They can go to codeswitchingmovie.com, and we'll soon have lots of updates there.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you both very much for taking the time to join us.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan Schwartz and Mike Mascoll. We'll have more news in just a moment.